Hello all, and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. My name is Erica, also known as the Serpentine Gemini, so called because I am a Gemini, born in the year of the snake. And this channel is here as a means of documenting, sharing my process for creating stuff. Now, I know the word stuff is very broad, but I use it intentionally because my interests and crafter's audacity, and I can't disguise the scope of which is larger, often lead me to try my hand at a lot of different things. Primarily, I love sewing. That being said, I also dip my toes into doll customization, art doll creation, leather working, maybe millinery, and probably countless other things I haven't tried yet, but will ultimately end up fixated on at some point. The through line to all of that, though, is that I like to say that I exist somewhere in the liminal space between the historical and the fantastical. My work and creative inspiration is often triggered by a combination of the two. I'm an avid armchair historian with a background in literature. Because of that, I'm heavily inspired by history, the accurate version of, and also at times the romanticized version of, because both have merit and both speak to the human experience and human creativity as a whole, which I think for me is the primary thing that I am interested in. So please, if you're here and that sounds like something that you would be interested in following along with, I sincerely hope that you will consider subscribing and joining me on this journey. So, without further ado, let's get into our very first project.
Hello. So, do you ever have that thing happen where you have an idea, but then you start working on the idea and the idea slowly morphs and gets out of your hands until you have two completely separate ideas that you now have to follow through to their inevitable conclusion? No? Me neither. However, I have now been led by the crafting gods to complete not one, but two Halloween costumes. So what we're gonna do today, or past Erica is gonna do, is going to create an Undead Anne Boleyn costume. Let me set the scene for you, okay? The year, 1536. The place, the Tower of London. Anne Boleyn's judicial murder by her husband, Henry VIII, has been delayed now multiple times. And poor Anne is starting to, for lack of a better term, lose her shit a little bit. Can you imagine the stress levels? Because I can't. Now we're going to step into what if alternate universe territory. What if on the final night before her accident... Do you believe I have a lit degree and I can barely speak? What if on the final night before her execution, a mysterious stranger appears out of the dark? A mysterious stranger reaches out a cold hand and promises her an escape from the impending doom and uncertainty she faces with the coming of the dawn. An escape that would also provide her with immortality and eternal life. So Anne reaches out. She takes the hand and joins the ranks of the undead. Dun dun dun. Okay, so let's get out of the fantastical and into the actual nuts and bolts of this outfit. So we're going to do a traditional rectangular constructed shift. Shout out to Thistleweed Atelier for providing an absolutely excellent tutorial for making these on her Patreon. I'll link that below for you if you're interested. And then I wanted to have very long fitted sleeves, probably with an opening or slit at the wrist to kind of give it a slight flare that'll cover the hand. Vaguely historically accurate, and I say that with a good amount of and then the pièce de résistance, as it were, is going to be an
So my mic decided to die on me here, so I basically just go on to say that I want to make a huge and fairly elaborate Tudor cloak and let you know that we are going to dive on in. So let's do that.
Good morning. Okay, today I want to do a mock-up of the shift, a smock-up, if you will. I think I'm gonna do it with slightly different sleeves. The one that I'm gonna do for the costume for my life in general is gonna be full length and is going to have very long fitted sleeves that kind of flow gracefully over the hand. The fabric that I acquired for that is a silk cotton voile. It is not inexpensive. So I need to do a mock-up to make sure all the measurements that I think are gonna work do in fact work. So that is today's order of business. Wish me luck. Pray that I can let go of my perfectionism a little bit today. Let's get cracking. For today's mock-up, we are going to use my personal favorite medium of all time, sheets. Let's dive in. You know what time it is? It's fabric cutting ASMR time. Ooh, baby. Behold my smock-up. I did not record the making of this because it was a lot of like figuring things out and fiddling.
Full transparency, I also got completely hyper-focused and locked in and just forgot to start recording the process, so figured I would just record the final one. Welcome to my chaos brain. Anyway,
now that I have it a little more fine-tuned, I'll film the making of the actual chemise shift smock, whatever, that I'm gonna wear for Halloween. That's out of my good fabric that I'm afraid to cut. Really couldn't be bothered to do a full-length one as a mock-up because it would have taken a lot of time. The main goal with this was to make sure that the measurements that I had for the neckline and the shoulder strap width and all that stuff was correct, and I think it is. I really like this. People back in the day were onto something, man. Why did we ever stop wearing these? That's what I want to know. This is so comfortable. This is a vibe. I want one in a bunch of colors and a bunch of lengths. Thrift store sheet section hates to see me coming. You may be wondering, why is she dressed like a pirate? Let me answer your question with a question of my own. Why aren't you? Today is a day that I have been preparing for with a mix of both anticipation and dread. We are going to make the shift chemise smock, like the actual one, not this delightfully piratey one that I'm currently wearing. We're gonna do the real one, which means we're gonna cut into my fabric, which I am so terrified to do. I'm like gripped by the terror of like, oh my God, what if I make a mistake? So let's do this thing. Yeah.
and now at last it's time to appreciate this gorgeous, gorgeous fabric that is almost as exquisite as Joel Schumacher's underrated 2004 masterpiece, Phantom of the Opera.
Gentlemen.
Now that I've got that out of my system, I'm going to iron the ever-loving shit out of it, because as everybody knows, sewing is 90% ironing and 10% everything else. From there, I'm going to pin the fabric down securely to make sure that slippery little sucker doesn't do any moving while I'm trying to cut this fabric. That is so precious to me, I fear only Smeagol would understand. As you can see, and I'm using the technical term here, the pinning took fucking forever and was followed, oh joy of joys, by even more ironing. But then we got into what sewists refer to as the fun shit by drawing a line from the outside of the shoulder seam to the bottom of the shift's hem. And then I started cutting, and let me tell you, I don't think I've ever clenched anything harder in my life than my jaw when I was trying to make sure I cut this straight. I have this handy dandy vintage sleeve pattern. I'm going to use this one right here to create the long fitted sleeves I want for this project. I personally happen to be blessed with very wide shoulders and lats and very skinny noodly wrists, so I had to figure out how to fit that before I proceeded with cutting any sleeve patterns out. Then of course more ironing, I did warn you. And because I wanted the sleeves on this dress to be extra long, to lean into that ghostly, pseudo-medieval / Edwardian vibe, I suppose we could really call it what the Victorians thought the medieval period looked like. I traced the top of the sleeve, then added on the amount that I wanted to add to make the sleeve the length that I wanted, and then traced the bottom of the sleeve at that. Then I simply connected the dots between the top of the sleeve and the bottom of the sleeve. Then, because I live in a state of abject terror of messing up on this fabric, I repinned and repressed the fabric again to make sure nothing would move before I cut the sleeves. And then at last I whipped out my trusty scissors and went for it, because why are we here really? And I removed all the pins and tried on the sleeve and adjusted the fit accordingly. And now a Guillermo del Toro appreciation break.
On today's episode of How Many Times Will Erica Watch Crimson Peak? Spoiler alert, a lot.
I also needed to cut out all the bias tape with which I'm going to bind the neckline to create a drawstring. And that's all the cutting, folks.
Behold a shift. It's literally a rectangle of fabric with a big hole in the middle. Bias binding time. I learned this fun trick from Thistleweed Atelier's instructional on her Patreon. Basically, all you do is you pin your bias just at the starting point and you overlap it a little bit, a smidge more. All I'm gonna do is pin this just at my starting point, and then I'm gonna take it to the machine and sew it without pinning the rest so that the bias binding, because it is cut on the bias and has some stretch to it now, even though the fabric itself is not a fabric with stretch, and then just kind of gently stretch it into place around the curves. And it's actually really easy, and it worked very, very well with this one that I did as a mock-up to make sure that I didn't shit the proverbial bed. All right, so let us go take this to the machine, and I'm gonna sew it like 1/2 centimeter approximately from the edge all the way around, and then roll that over, and then that'll create the channel. So I'm gonna go do that. To the machine! Why are you turned that way, friend? Submit to my will. So when I reach a curve in the neckline, I don't just want to rip around it because it'll cause puckering. So all I'm going to do is lift up my foot with the needle still inserted in the fabric. I don't know if you can see that. The needle's still in the fabric, but the foot is up. Then I'll just adjust the fabric so everything is nice and smooth. Put my foot back down and sew until I get to a place where the bias tape and the body of the shift diverge. So I'm about to get there in just a second. So here I am again. So needle is in the fabric. I lift up the foot, carefully turn. Then I'm just going to adjust so that the edge of the shift and the bias tape align again. Nothing is being tugged too much. And then I'm going to put the foot back down and keep going.
Just a baby. Behold the shift. It is complete. Just have to hem the sleeves, but
Hello. I feel like a flaming pile of hot garbage, but you gotta do what you gotta do, man. Crafter's audacity never sleeps. So, today we're gonna make a cloak. Is this overly ambitious? Yes. Do I feel like death warmed up? Also, yes. What does all of this mean? Let's get cracking. Okay. I'm going. Let's do it. Oh.
So here's what I'm thinking. I want to start with a really enormous cloak with a big floppy hood, ideally some kind of closure that represents a falcon, which was one of Anne's badges. Really important factor that I really want is a pair of huge Tudor sleeves that fold back to show the sumptuous inner lining. I want this to be floor length, and then I want a fur trim all across. I want the outer fabric to be red. I want the inner fabric to be a brocade cloth of gold, and then faux sable specifically on the lining. And then, as I said, some big ass Tudor sleeves. So we got a plan.
For the outside of the cloak, I found this duvet cover at the thrift. I love the color. I think the color is absolutely perfect. Then, check out this baby. I love this. I love this so much. And I love that the border has roses on it. For any of you who know your history, one of the badges used by the House of Tudor was a rose, combined of the red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York. So I really love that there were like two different colored roses on here. They're neither white nor red, but whatever, you know, like, don't be petty. It's fine.
This is fine.
Then I found this gorgeous faux fur. There's only 1.5 meters left, so hopefully that's enough. I'm gonna put it around, just like, I can't think of words right now. I'm so sick, guys. Damn it. I'm gonna put it around the edges of the hood and hopefully along the entire trim. It's gonna be trim. Thank you, brain. The brain is so smooth and so words. Oh, and the pattern. Where's the pattern? Ah, there you are, you sneaky little sucker. Beauty. And I'm aware that Beauty does not have slits for sleeves, but I feel pretty confident about being able to just pop them on in there. So minor snafu. I don't think I'm going to have enough of this fabric to line the entirety of the cape because I need 2 of the front and 2 of the back. And I also really want to add on those Tudor sleeves. Now, the most important thing for me with this fabric was that the roses were like present just on the inside opening of the cape and on the inside of the hood there. So if you can see the way I've laid this out, that's achieved, which is great. I think I'm going to need to figure something out for lining back of the cape cloak. So I think I'm going to have to dive into my fabric stash and find a different fabric to line it with. Just a little minor pickle, you know? We're going to figure this out, okay? We're going to use our big brains.
1 eternity later.
When I tell you the absolute odyssey that I just went through to find this, I knew I had this kind of like golden velvet in my stash. I knew this. And if this is not enough fabric for this, I am going to cry. So please, send good vibes. Send good vibes. Send good vibes.
And thanks to the help of this gold velvet that's been sitting in my stash for over 2 years, I was able to cut out and sew together the 3 large triangles that make up the lining of the cloak.
Like, this fabric brings me untold amounts of joy. Like, look at it. Ooh, my magpie brain is just a happy little boy right now. So there's that. And we have the outside, which I have yet to iron. And I managed to preserve this like kind of funky little trim along the bottom of the duvet cover. So there's that. So we have to attach those 2 today. Wait for it. Wait for it. The hood. It's giving like fancy friar right now. It's fun. I like it. So let's get to ironing and assembling. And then we have to add all of the fur trim. This is going to be fur apocalypse, okay? Because this stuff sheds. Fur apocalypse sounds like the furries metal band I never knew I needed. Let's do it. And I hit my finger when I snapped. Oh, mobility is no fun, y'all.
And then I set about the fun task of pinning the hood and the two sides of the cloak right sides together with the hood inside the cloak. It sounds confusing? It kind of was, but we got there eventually, and then I took it to the machine and sewed it, which I didn't record because it was boring. And then it was fur trim time, which basically involved cutting many strips of faux fur, approximately 6 inches wide, then sewing the edges of those furry strips together to make cute little caterpillar tubes, and sewing those between the edges of the cloak. And with that, the cloak was done.
Who is she?
Well, I'm pretty tickled. So now I have to decide where the sleeves are going to be placed. And I've left the hem to last because I think I'm going to need to turn this whole thing inside out in order to put the sleeves in. I'm like a little confused about how I'm going to do that, so stay tuned. Middle of the front panel basically seems like the best place, I think, because that way it can still stay relatively kind of closed while I'm using my hands. And then I guess like elbow height is probably the wisest place. So like hereabouts. And then my arms will come out like that. I think that makes the most sense. Yeah. For the sleeves, I looked at photos of actual Tudor sleeves, and then I also looked at like patterns of them online, and like they're kind of a mushroom shape. So anyway, we ended up with this kind of like vaguely like mushroom top / UFO shaped panel. I'm just gonna sew these two suckers right sides together. Yeah, right sides together, and then kind of like assemble them like that. My brain hurts a little bit. Let us assemble the sleeves.
Did you find the fabric stash? Yes, you found the fabric stash.
Now I think what I'm gonna do is gonna make this work the best is I'm gonna pin all the layers together. So like the lining of the sleeve, the two outer layers of both the sleeve and the cloak, and then the inner layer of the cloak. Pin all this together. I'm going to sew them all together, and then I think I'm just going to slap some bias binding on it in, because I have some of this mustard golden velvet left. So I'll cut a little strip of bias tape, I think, from that, and then just wrap this in it so I don't have to worry about finishing this edge, because this is so chaotic. And this fabric, this like blanket, it sheds so much. My entire house is covered in like gold fluff because of this blanket. Worth it, but a pain in the ass. Yeah, all right, let's pin this sucker and then we'll do that.
I elected to hand sew on this binding because, let me tell you, working with all those layers of fabric combined with the fact that the gold blanket seemed hell-bent on self-destruction via unraveling and covering both me and my entire house in the remnants of its carcass made this incredibly difficult. But with that last tedious detail, it is done and we can head into the reveal.
It's me.
All right, let's recap. So, overall, I'm really happy with how this costume turned out. I love the cloak. It was kind of an afterthought. It wasn't meant to be like the star of the show, but as so often happens with craft or audacity, it just kind of gets away from you. And then all of a sudden it's like the showstopper. So anyway, I'm really obsessed with it. It's actually really warm and cozy. And you will definitely be catching me wandering around my house swathed in this all winter long. And I love the shift. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of use out of this in my life. A big thing for me with making costumes or whatever is that it's pieces that I'm actually going to wear in my life. And I would actually wear this as like a dress with a slip underneath, or as like an underdress, put a skirt over top or whatever, like as it's meant to be worn. So there were a couple things I didn't get to, and I think I'm going to just add before Halloween. I didn't get to adding a clasp to the neck. I didn't feel like it was integral. Although I do have some really cool brass eagles that kind of reminded me of Anne Boleyn's falcon badge. I also have, but I'm not quite done, a choker that I'm in the middle of making. I've embroidered it, and it says "Nole mi tangere," which in Latin means "touch me not," and it's from this really incredible poem by Thomas Wyatt, which is kind of funny because he's just being like a petty, jealous guy. It's called "Whoso Lists to Hunt." You should absolutely read it. It's beautiful, especially the end. It says, "Nole mi tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold though I seem tame." So anyway, it's a really beautiful poem, and it's supposed to be about her. And then I also really wanted to put, I can't remember the whole, I think it's "Ansi sera groigna ki groigna," which basically means that's how it's going to be. Let them grumble. Which was one of her mottos, which I think is just so punk rock. Like she was like, I don't give a fuck what you say, I'm gonna do me. Yet another reason why I love this woman. I want to put that around the brim of the hood. That is the best motto ever. All the other wives had like, oh, the most humble, no other will but his. And then she's got like,
and they ain't saying nothing. 100 mother can't tell me nothing.
As her motto. I love her. So those are the things that I didn't get to for this video. I wanted to dress up as Anne Boleyn for a very long time, but couldn't think of a way to do it. Didn't want to do the typical, like, you know, Henrician French gown and the French hood vibe. I wanted something a little different and a little more, put my own spin on it, I guess. And this is where I landed, like it or not. No matter how they grumble, this is how it's going to be. I would love to know what you think. I'd love to know what you think about Anne Boleyn, about her, you know, various accusations. I'd love to know your thoughts on this kind of a spin on the costume. So, you know, please drop a comment down below. Please like and please subscribe by hitting the little subscribe button on the bottom of the video. I would be very, very grateful. I'm trying to build this platform so that I can show more of what I love to do and what feeds my soul, and we can all nerd out together on history and historical fashion and, you know, the liminal space between history and fantasy that we all love to inhabit so much. On that note, I hope you have a very happy Halloween. I hope you get to dress up and, you know, do whatever you want to do. Live your best spooky season life, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it to the end, I cannot express how grateful I am that you're here, if you're here. So thank you. Bye.